Have you ever felt insignificant or underappreciated or even overlooked? All of us sometimes in our life have felt that we are underappreciated, that we might wonder whether my life even counts. Am I doing something that really matters? I live in obscurity and nobody even bothers what am I doing and what's happening to me. Nothing matters to them. I live in hiding. Moses, who hid the Egyptian newspapers headlines for a brief period of time, and whose name was in the front pages, lived in such an obscurity for 40 long years. You know, before rising to that position, he was in the desert languishing for 40 long years. Moses was born as a slave. He was adopted by the Egyptian princess, and he was growing up in the palace. He was educated in the Egyptian customs. And one day when he saw his fellow Israelites were beaten up by an Egyptian, he killed him, and because of which he had to run away from Egypt to a desert, to Sinai desert. And he was languishing alone for 40 long years. Might be Moses would have felt that everything is over during those periods. The difference between reality and our expectation is that gap is the disappointment. Moses would have been disappointed. He thought, I expected to be there, I expected to do these things, but actually I'm here. I wanted to do that, but I'm doing this. I'm just tending the sheep, which is a loathsome job to Egyptians. I'm doing a low job when I'm supposed to be the prince there. Might be you are in that position. You might be feeling that many others are doing many great things and I'm doing such small things and no one is bothering about it. Take hope. There can be a burning bush moment in your life. In Moses' life, as he was walking, one day he saw a fresh bush burning with fire, and he went towards it with curiosity, and he saw and met the God who created heaven and earth in that burning bush. And everything changed. When you meet God, everything changes. When the holy meets the unholy, that moment changes everything. The trivial things, whatever you are running after for the trivial things, now changes. Your desire changes. Everything, your perspective changes. It is that burning bush moment changed Moses' life completely, and it took a great turn. Now Moses was ready to abandon every trivial thing for the sheer joy of knowing God, for the sheer joy of following Him, of obeying Him. For him nothing mattered but God. He wanted to do everything what he said. Now his hunger and thirst and everything, he had a burning desire to do his work. So that God had to wait for that moment for so many years, 80 years, because he had to train Moses. And when Moses came to the understanding that by his own strength nothing is possible, God started using him. He appointed him as a leader to bring that lakhs and lakhs of Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses did it wonderfully. God gave him the tool. God gave him the abilities. God gave him the persons to go with him and the persons to speak for him. God gave him everything. When God calls you, He will equip you. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. That is the difference. So don't worry. Don't allow your insecurities to overtake you. If you're called by God to do a great thing, don't worry of the big things. God will provide everything to do that. If I have been asked to hire a person to bring Israelites out of that slavery, I would never hire Moses because his resume was not impressing. He was born a slave. He had stutter, he had bad temper. He was doing just a shepherd job for 40 long years. And I wouldn't have never hired him. But God's ways are totally different. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts, God says. God can make you a great leader. might be he is using this period to train you. Moses followed the transformational leadership style. Transformational leaders are visionaries. They are daring. They are risk takers. They are thoughtful thinkers. And transformational leadership style changes the followers into leaders. It involves an investing in their lives and changing them and bringing a great change in individuals plus social systems, and with the end goal of changing the followers into leaders. Leaders do not make followers. Leaders develop leaders. It should reproduce. A good leader will reproduce himself. Moses followed that approach. He had a great conflict resolution skill, and he had also a great counseling skill. So he was counseling so many people. But once when his father-in-law Jethro advised him to give it to some other people who are wise enough to handle it so that he will not be overloaded, he understood it and he delegated wisely. A good leader will know how to delegate the works. He delegated the works to teams and group leaders he made who can oversee them. And that way he delegated it wisely. And also Moses developed leaders. Joshua was always with him. He followed Moses wherever he went, and he understood from Moses how to love God, how to do everything whatever God says, and how to lead the people. Joshua enjoyed being with Moses, and Moses encouraged him by sending him to fight the war, by sending him into the land, Canaan land, to find out what happens there. Moses trained Joshua, and finally after Moses, Joshua became the leader. So that's why I said leaders do not make followers, leaders make leaders. And the most important, the final thing which I would like to say and close in the life of Moses is, Moses had a beautiful prayer life. He had intimacy with God which nobody else had in that time. He used to go up on the Mount Sinai for 40 long days and used to be with God and converse with God. And he had that intimacy with God. He stood before God on behalf of the people and came to the people on behalf of God. And that's why people respected him. Once when he came down, his face was shining so much that people could not even look at him. That much intimacy he had with God. And Moses did not rule the people by being above them. He ruled them by being with them. Good leaders do not consider themselves that they should rule others by being above them. Good leaders train people by being with them. Moses did that. He taught them prayer life. He developed them and brought them out of the polytheistic culture to a place where God alone, the God who made heaven and earth, the living God, will be their God, and they will worship the only true God. He brought them from that polytheistic culture to this understanding of true God. So he developed them, he made leaders, he delegated wisely. He was so close to God, he was so intimate with God, and that's why he could do everything. God gave him the strategy, and he was a great transformational leader. He transformed the society, he transformed the whole group of people he was leading. And I encourage you to become one such leader.